Good evening, everyone. I'm Janet Steinmayer. I'm Lesley University's president, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to virtual Lesley University. I'd particularly like to welcome and thank Hans Strauch, the chair of Lesley's Board of Trustees, whose generous gift makes possible the annual Strauch-Mosse Visiting Artist Lecture series that brings us tonight's speaker, Julia S. Powell. Thank you, Hans. We're so grateful for all you do for Lesley. I'd also like to welcome Dean of the College of Art and Design, Amy Green-Dinas, and several of our art and design faculty, staff, and students. We are so lucky at Lesley to be home to a College of Art and Design that's one of the nation's premier independent art schools and one of only 3 housed in a university. LAND, as we call it, is housed in a state-of-the-art facility in Cambridge's Porter Square, the Lunder Art Center, the magnificent result of the kindness of Lesley alumna Paula Lunder and her husband Peter, both of whom we're delighted to have with us tonight. In addition to the fine arts, we teach graphic design and illustration, digital filmmaking, animation, and motion media. And this fall, we're very excited to be adding an interactive media program with courses in game design and programming and VFX. Next year, the background, when I speak, whatever it is, virtual or not, will surely be animated. I'm also pleased to see and welcome many others in our virtual audience who are likely among Julia's legion of social media friends and fans, including my daughter, Laura, whose husband, Hattie, introduced us to Julia and whose home is enlivened by Julia's prints. Welcome, one and all. Tonight, Julia's topic is reinvention, and it's something she has mastered to a remarkable level. Not only has Julia succeeded quite magnificently in reinventing herself professionally, but she has excelled in inventing new ways of sharing her art and the world and reaching a wider audience. At a time when it is estimated that today's students will have as many as 7 different careers, not jobs, careers. Over their lifetimes, reinvention is truly a skill for the future. As a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Yale and a graduate of Stanford Law School, Julia seemed destined to become a senior partner at a prestigious law firm. But tonight she'll talk about the path that brought her to a painting career instead. And in a profession traditionally controlled by galleries and other gatekeepers of the art market, Julia has blazed a way to 142,000 followers on Instagram, using social media to demonstrate her creative process, to brand herself, and to sidestep gallery representation and create her own art market. She was commissioned to create original artwork for the fabulous new restaurant on Pier 4 in Boston's Seaport District, the Woods Hill Pier 4. Her work appeared on Mindy Kaling's hit TV show, The Mindy Project, and has been featured in Architectural Digest, Marie Claire, and Yankee Magazine. Julia's been profiled by Boston Magazine, Artsy Magazine, and Exhale Magazine. Tonight, we're gathered virtually because a global pandemic has disrupted almost every aspect of our lives over the past year, further proving how adaptive and resilient we will all need to be in the future. As someone so fluent in moving between the tactile and the virtual worlds, putting paint on canvas and sharing her creative process online, Julia is an inspiration and a role model for students of all ages. I'm so excited to hear about Julia's reinvention story. I'm thrilled she can join us tonight. And Julia, I turn the Zoom stage over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Janet, and thank you, Amy, and thank you to the entire Lesley community. I'm honored to be a visiting artist in these strangest of times. I also want to thank my virtual audience, my Instagram followers who are tuning in, and I would like to thank the small group of close friends and family members who are joining me physically tonight. So thank you all. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my work, I'm a professional artist. I paint mostly large-scale textured oil paintings They're meant to bring people a sense of joy, a sense of calm, be a sort of meditative space. And I was born and raised in Cambridge, and I live here now. And I love Cambridge. I think that it's a really great place. I will say that I left for a while. I think it's important for us Cantabrigians and New Englanders to get out of Dodge, explore the world before coming back and developing into the charming weirdos and curmudgeons we all eventually inevitably become. And a brief note here about sense of place and belonging. As I said, I love Cambridge. It's colorful and diverse, and no doubt it has had a profound impact on who I am. But every summer for 4 to 8 weeks, I go up to Maine, up to the coast of Maine near Acadia National Park. And I've gone there since I was born. My mother has gone there since she was born, and my grandfather went there since he was a child. I go up there with my family and my extended family, and we have certain family traditions. We have an annual softball game, we have a barn dance, we have a kite festival, we have a sailboat regatta, we even have a family newspaper. And so every year when I go up there, I'm transported back to last year and to my 20s and to my childhood. And you know, when you're a child, you're very much in the present. And if you're on the seashore, you're just skipping rocks in the ocean, or you're walking through the forest and there's shafts of light coming through the trees, and you're just happy and present. And I think much of what I'm trying to accomplish with my work is trying to get you back to that feeling when you're a kid and you're just happy and you're in a sunlit field. That feeling is what I'm trying to capture. And so in a sense, I'm not really trying to paint a scene so much as paint a memory or a dream of a scene, which is an entirely different experience. Now, you might be expecting to hear about the carefully laid path that led me to here, the deliberate choices that I made, but my path was not carefully laid, and nor was it direct. And before I talk about what got me to here, I want to be very clear about where I am. As I said, I'm a professional artist, but I sell my work nationally and internationally, and I don't have other gigs. I don't teach, I just paint. And that's a very particular distinction. I have loved painting since I was a kid, and I was watercoloring for fun since I was 5 years old, but I did not take a single art class in middle school, high school, college, or graduate school. Aside, I shall say, from a photography class my senior year, shout out to Miss Dobson, and a 3-day watercoloring class that I took when I was 17 years old with my mother. So I am essentially completely self-taught. And I'm about to build my dream studio on top of my garage. And this has been a dream for the past 8 years since I've been painting, since I fell in love with painting and decided I wanted to marry it and be with it forever. And this studio will be funded entirely from the sale of paintings. And I'm incredibly proud of this. So here's what got me to here, where I am now. I never felt like I was meant to be an artist. I was not one of those kids who knew in my bones when I was young that I was supposed to be an artist. And let me say this because it is so incredibly important. Realizing what you want to do later in life, realizing what you're meant to do later in life, in no way makes you less worthy of realizing that dream. Now, for certain professions, it may make you less capable of fulfilling that dream. If you want to be a concert pianist or you want to be a professional basketball player, you've got to figure that out before the age of 30. And you probably have to have the right genetics as well. But for many people who want to be writers or artists or nurses or architects, there's this notion that there reaches a point in your life when it's too late. And I would like to push back against too late, because again, figuring out what you want to do later in life in no way makes you less worthy of realizing that dream. So my story, my parents were academics. They met in Cambridge, they met at Harvard, and growing up, I had extremely high expectations. I went to Cambridge Public Schools, and then I went to a local private school, BB&N. BB&N pushed me very hard, particularly in the realm of athletics and academics. And for me, it was really a perfect fit. When you're in high school, I think people tend to categorize you as certain things. If you are lucky, you're known as the kid who's a good soccer player, who's a good writer, who can sing well in musicals, who can write well, who's funny. And if you're unlucky, you are teased, perhaps mercilessly, for some perceived flaw or deficit or shortcoming. And people correlate certain boxes with other boxes. And I would say for me, I was known as a student athlete. I was a serious soccer and lacrosse player, and I was a good student. And I loved musicals. I mean, I still love musicals, huge musical nerd. I couldn't sing very well. I couldn't dance very well. I couldn't act very well, but I did like musicals. And I also liked art, and I would doodle and I would watercolor for fun, but it sort of felt like the athletic scholar side of me pushed out those other things because the boxes didn't correlate with one another. And so in high school, I damped down, I just dampened down those things that I really liked to do because they didn't seem to fit. I ended up at Yale. I ended up not even playing sports. And at Yale, I was very focused academically. And as I neared the end of college, I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I thought, okay, I have to go to graduate school. Why? Well, my brothers had gone, my parents had gone, uncles had gone, aunts had gone. So it felt like graduate school made sense. Okay, what graduate school? I liked arguing. I still do. I really do like arguing. And I liked politics. So law school seemed like a natural fit. But to be honest, I never thought, what do I want to do for the 8 to 10 hours a day that I would be working? What do I want to do? Do I want to be with people or not? Do I want to be in front of a computer or not? Do I want to be writing mostly, reading mostly? Do I want flexibility? Do I want to be creative? All of the real decisions that you have to make before you figure out what kind of profession you want, I didn't think about. I thought about the optics, what would look good, that I would also be good at. So I ended up at law school. I did not like my classes very much. I wasn't engaged. I did well enough so that I could get some offers from firms. And at the time, my oldest brother was getting married, and he asked me to watercolor the wedding invitations. I did. Some law students saw what I had done, and they decided that they wanted me to watercolor certain things for them. I did engagement parties, or I did thank you notes, or some other weddings, and I had a little side business. Now, I use business loosely because I wasn't paid for any of it, and I certainly would have never thought to have asked to have been paid for any of it. But you know, obviously there was some interest there in the kind of creative work I was doing. So anyway, I moved to New York City when I graduated. I started working at a law firm. I was in debt. I was working 70 or 80 hours a week. And if you ask me, well, what were you doing? I'll tell you this fascinating story. I maybe combed through about 2,000 emails for several months. And if they mentioned sodium silicate production in one of, wait for it, 10 Midwestern counties, then I would tag them green. And if they didn't, I would tag them red. So, you know, the stuff of dreams. So, you know, look, I get that as I moved up the ladder of being a corporate attorney, I would do more interesting work or more interesting work than that. But, you know, I just knew it wasn't for me, that this work was not for me. And I thought, well, you know, maybe if I practice law and I work with people more, that would be a better fit. So I moved back to Cambridge and I started working with a guy. We did wills, trusts, and estates. We did real estate. And personality-wise, it was a perfect fit. I mean, he was the best boss. He's still a dear friend of mine. And as much as I loved working with him because he was great, I did not love the work. And so I thought, okay, well, how am I going to sort of figure myself out? And I thought I would write a book. I'd write a book for middle grade kids, maybe 6th or 7th graders. And I had loved Roald Dahl growing up. He wrote Matilda and the Twits and James and the Giant Peach, sort of an early precursor to J.K. Rowling. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write the new Roald Dahl, like fantasy, amazing book. And I wrote a book and I workshopped it for a year in writers groups. I submitted it to the Boston Public Library's Children's Writer in Residence program. I was a finalist and I lost. And I submitted it to so many agents and publishers, and I got rejected from everyone. And it was just sort of a string of endless no's. So I got a little depressed. I was in my early 30s. All of my friends seemed to be getting married to their soulmates and having beautiful weddings, or if they were already married to their soulmates, they were having beautiful children. That was not happening for me. And I know, and I knew that I am extraordinarily lucky in so many ways. I have been gifted opportunities my entire life. I have been privileged my entire life. And still I was suffering. And perhaps a different person would have picked themselves up, been more resilient, edited the book, tried again, or maybe I would have listened to a podcast about failure, or I would have had my own podcast about failure, right? Because I was like killing it at failure at the time, so I could have owned that podcast. But podcasts weren't in, and failure hadn't like become a thing. So I didn't do any of those things. I just gave up on the book and put it aside. Well, that Christmas, my middle brother gave me the most unusual present. He gave me an easel, he gave me oil paints, he gave me canvases, and he gave me brushes. It was unusual because I had neither expressed interest in or aptitude for oil painting. So I would say it was rather random. But he said something to me which was really interesting, which is that he had been experimenting with painting, and there was something really fabulous about painting a single painting, small. You could actually start a canvas the beginning of the day, and then you could end the canvas at the end of the day, and you would have actually created something in one day, which of course you cannot do when you're writing a book, right? If you're writing a book, it takes what, like months, years, decades. And so there was something really great for him about this creative process of painting a painting, and he thought maybe I would enjoy it. And then he said something which was so incredibly important. He said to me, Julia, you're really talented as a watercolorist, and you have never been taught. You have had no instruction. And maybe your gift for color, and maybe your gift for creating like a sense of mood or place, maybe that will translate to oil painting. And I really want to see what you can do. I gave this to you because I want to see what you can paint. And to have someone say to me, yes, I want to see more, not less, after this endless string of no's, well, it was so important. And he's here with me tonight. And it changed the course of my life. So it gets me a little emotional. I tried it and I liked it. And then I loved it. I really fell in love with it. I became particularly obsessed with Monet and Van Gogh. And Monet for his ability to capture light and his use of color, and Van Gogh for his use of texture and color. And, I was just really experimenting with all kinds of different techniques. I was on YouTube a lot. I read a lot of books about landscape painting. And, when I started out, I was not good. Okay, you guys need to know this. I was not very good. I didn't understand perspective. I didn't understand underpainting. I didn't know how to gesso a canvas. I didn't even understand the difference between oil paint and water mixable oil paint. Now, if you want to clean oil paint off of a brush, you basically need to use something called turpentine, which is incredibly toxic. And at the time, my studio was a small square space in my living room, so not an ideal place for toxic chemicals. And so I kept trying to clean my brushes with soap and water. It did not work, and I kept throwing out brushes. And I thought, this is an incredibly expensive profession, because every time you use a brush, you have to throw it out. Now, I get that like a simple Google search would have probably given me more information, but what it did is it led me to developing a technique with a palette knife, which is much easier to clean. So I started using a palette knife, and I just was working all the time. I was practicing law during the day, and in the evenings and on weekends, I was teaching myself how to paint. In the beginning, my two older brothers and my dear friends bought my early work. And it was probably mostly terrible, but they bought it and they encouraged me and they said it was good. And it was enough encouragement to keep going, to feel like, okay, maybe something's here. Maybe there's a little grain here that could develop into something. And that was incredibly important. And I want to say something here that's so important, and it's linked to my friends and it's linked to my brothers and my parents, is you are going to go through life at some point, everyone does, and you're going to have self-doubt and you're going to have imposter syndrome and you're going to question yourself. You have to surround yourself with great people who think that you are amazing. You have to. That is the way to buoy yourself up when you have those moments where you just don't have the strength. So what you do is you get the strength from your friends and your family to tell you that you're the best. And here I am in a room of people and they're great and they think I'm great. And that is very, very important. So in those early days, I think I had a fair amount of freedom in that I did not think I was supposed to be good at painting. And so I could sort of experiment, right? I hadn't been taught. This wasn't something I should be good at. And I think that let me sort of develop my own voice in a way. And that was so important. I mean, if you think that you're supposed to do something a certain way, right? Because you've been taught to do it, well, then, you do it that certain way. But if you don't know how you're supposed to do something, you often do it a little bit differently. And that is unusual. And that can lead you down a pretty cool path. So I think it was a gift that I was, in fact, self-taught and didn't exactly know kind of what I was doing. Now, at the time, Instagram had been around for a few years. And so many people who were artists were telling me I needed to focus on gallery representation. And I did. I developed a relationship with a great gallery in Boston, Abigail Ogilvy, and that was important. But I also had this sense that Instagram was a really interesting place, and perhaps I should kind of poke around in there a little bit more. So I decided to open up an art account, and really kind of from the beginning, I took it extremely seriously. I was focused. I did not post bad photos. I did not post photos that were extraneous to my art. And I really paid attention to how the posts were doing. And this is really the kind of legal analytical part of my brain just sort of kicked into high gear. And this is what is so amazing about diving into something new when you've already devoted a tremendous amount of time into kind of putting knowledge into your brain from previous experiences, jobs, relationships. It all matters. It all matters. Everything you've done before matters for where you are now. And so for me, that was really kind of a sort of a fabulous thing to remember. Instead of kind of worrying so much about this past, is just to sort of embrace it a little bit. Another thing about that is, with Instagram, when I started out, there's admin and there's marketing, and I was probably on there for 25 hours a week trying to figure out how to boost my feed up. Okay, this is drudge work. Now, I knew about drudge work, right? Sodium silicate production, Midwestern counties. So it all matters, right? I could deal with drudge work. And honestly, what a gift to have just a small part of your job be drudge work, right? So many people in the world, okay, their entire job is drudge work, and they're also probably underpaid and underappreciated. And so I did not mind that I wasn't painting, right? Like artists, we just want to paint. If all I could do is paint, that would be great. But I kind of had to do the other stuff, and that was okay. Instagram. I could do an entire talk about Instagram. Right. On the one hand, okay, it's this incredible platform, okay, where you just can sort of beam your art out nationally and internationally, right? What an incredible distribution platform. On the other hand, so much is lost when you take a photograph of a large scale, highly textured oil painting and you put it into a platform that is designed to be viewed on a smartphone. Okay. So, I struggle with it sometimes. But I'm going to say something about Instagram now, and it might be a bit controversial, which is I think that Instagram makes me a better artist. I think it makes me a better artist in two ways. One, by basically forcing me to create content all the time. And this makes me think about how to create new and interesting content. An example of this would be a few months ago, I was trying to kind of mix it up with my feed, and I decided that I would try to paint a bird. Now, I wasn't looking at a bird. It was like I just decided I would paint a bird as a time lapse and then post it on Instagram. So I did, and I had these metallic watercolors, and it was on black watercolor paper. And the first bird was just, not good. I mean, it was like a highly talented 7-year-old. And, the beak was off and the eye was off. But, people were kind of into this bird, and I thought, I'm kind of into this bird. And so I really pushed myself to paint more and more, figure out I actually looked at birds, which really helps when you're trying to create a bird. And they got better and they developed these little personalities. And I ended up creating this whole bird series. It was tremendously popular. It's sold out. And it was a great way to engage with my Instagram followers. And I would not have done this if I did not have the motivation to create content every day. The second way in which Instagram makes me a better artist is it essentially subjects my art to judgment every single day. So when I post, there are many, many people who are commenting or liking or engaging with a painting. And I am very aware that my followers are not art critics, they're not traditional art gatekeepers, they're not gallerists, but I think they're pretty discerning in that a stronger painting that I post will get more engagement, and a less strong painting that I post will get less engagement. And there's something important there. I get that just because something is popular doesn't make it good, but I do think that level of engagement, I do think that does matter. And so I think that subjecting my art to judgment, I don't know, I think it's been really helpful for me. And it's also helpful that it's a kind judgment, right? My Instagram followers are kind. They're not slamming my paintings. I do appreciate that. So, in these early days, I got a little self-conscious, I think, about my work. I'm practicing law, right? I'm on Instagram. I'm selling my work. I haven't transitioned full time into being an artist. And I think I've sort of had this feeling like Obama was president and people were hopeful, and, the world wasn't falling apart. There weren't like conspiracy theorist nutbags that were active members of Congress. And I sort of had this sense that like creating sort of joyful, meditative, happy work, maybe it wasn't that in. And as I had mentioned, I was struggling, I was struggling personally and professionally. I didn't know if I could actually do art full time. And I think the more I struggled internally, the more I wanted my art to act as an antidote to what I was feeling inside. And it was sort of essentially like, so some people want their art to shock. And I think that's an important, crucial element to art. But I did not want to shock people with my art. I wanted my art to bring them a sense of calm and happipiness. I really did. And, I found myself sort of wondering like, should I have been should I have been taught something? Should I know more information? Could I be a better painter? Canvases are expensive. and I would look back at early work from a year or two before, and in that time period, I had improved. And so I started painting over earlier canvases. I started a birch series, and this is a birch series, and this is actually painted over an orange and yellow and red seascape. This was a completed painting, completely painted over. And this is an early boat painting that I did. And this is 7 different paintings. Okay, the first painting that I did was an abstract forest. The second painting I did was an abstract seascape. Then I did birches. Then I did a field. Eventually, you get these boats, and you've got this really cool green poking through. That's from the field that I had done previously. And I got to thinking that every layer matters. These paintings that are amongst my favorite paintings, they could not exist. I could not recreate them without the previous so-called failed paintings. So in a way, every single failed painting is just a step towards eventually creating a successful painting. And this, of course, got me thinking about my life. One great carryover from being an attorney is the discipline. Every single day, 7 days a week, I paint or I draw. I do not wait for the spirit to move me. I go into my studio and I sit my butt down and I work. And there are many, many times where I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing and I don't really want to do it, but I am there because it is a job and I'm used to having a job, right? When you're a lawyer, you go in every single day. And look, there have been disasters of days where I've started 5 paintings and each one of them in their own beautiful, unique way comes out markedly worse after 6 hours of work. But hey, those disasters of days, they are all about experimentation. And eventually the experimentation leads to successful paintings. And so it's all good. Another great carryover from being an attorney is the issue of money. Now, when you're an attorney, you're very aware of how much you're getting paid per hour because you literally bill by the hour. And as I was transitioning from law to art, I did not want my per hour rate to drop off significantly. I couldn't let it drop off significantly. I had financial obligations. I did not have a partner who was helping me. And so I had to kind of pay attention to what I was worth and what my time was worth. Money is a funny thing to talk about when you're an artist. Sometimes there's this sense, I feel like, just do it for the art. And, we should live on oil paint fumes and our beautiful, weird thoughts and that should sustain us. I never understood this. Of course, I paint because I love to paint. Of course, I paint because it's an incredibly enjoyable activity, but I could not do it professionally if I was not earning an income from it. And I think it does artists, particularly student artists, a real disservice to divorce the discussion of the creation of art from the making of money from the creation of that art. I mean, there's very few professions where people don't think about earning an income in tandem with the kind of work that they're going to be doing. And I know that I'm going to paint for the rest of my life. I know this now because it is in my bones, even if I didn't always know it. But I don't know that I'll paint professionally for the rest of my life because people have to buy my art for that to happen, and I cannot predict that. So I'm often asked, do I have regrets? And, regret is a funny thing. I think that, nothing is so foolish as to try to change something that you can't change, right? Or to expend any kind of energy on something that you can't change. And so I do think about regret. People say, well, don't you wish you hadn't gone to law school? Don't you wish you hadn't gone into debt to go into a profession that you eventually left? Don't you wish you'd been formally taught? Don't you wish you had found yourself earlier? I think here's my take on regret. First of all, as I've said, I genuinely think that everything I've done leading up to where I am now, I think it all really matters for where I am. But here's the thing about regret. I think regret is only useful in so much as you can say, okay, look, in 20 years, will I regret if I don't do something now or soon? Which is to say that regret is useful as a forward-looking tool, not a backward-looking sinkhole. And so I don't regret everything that I've gone through. I don't wish I'd found myself earlier because I don't know if I'd be here if I'd found myself earlier. There's a poem by Denise Levertov, and it's I think it's called Stepping Westward. And in it, she describes her burdens as loaves of bread that hurt her shoulders, but also smell delicious. And in it, she says, I can eat as I go. There is nourishment to her burdens. And I think about that with mistakes and regrets. There is nourishment there. This past year has been the busiest year of my life. I never stopped what I was painting. I always painted joyful, colorful, textured, happy paintings. And I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was born here, so my politics should not come as a huge surprise to anyone watching this. As the world got darker in 2016, at least with regards to American leadership, which was to me obviously and outwardly horrific, and culminating in a worldwide pandemic, I think people were drawn to this calming, meditative, happy art. I started this because I wanted my art to act as an antidote to my internal struggles. But then it became an antidote for many of the struggles that the world was having. And I think other people who had their own struggles, they looked at my work and it transported them to happy places. It transported them to times in their childhood. If you ask me, Julia, what is your fantasy exhibition of your work? I would say this. It is 10 of the pieces behind me. They are 5 feet by 5 feet. It's my abstract water reflection series, which is one of my all-time favorite series. And we would be in a warmly lit room, and there'd be music playing, and people would sit in comfy chairs, and no one could talk. It's like the quiet car of Amtrak, except better in every measurable way. And you're sitting there and you're just there in the room and you're enjoying it. And so my fantasy exhibition is of these pieces. This piece was created by intentional layering over unintentional mistakes. So you have this massive red seascape that I had, and then eventually I painted over it with this blue color. And so you have intention and mistakes, but it all bleeds into each other. So you wonderful people who are watching, you know, if you want to change course in your life now, you can. If you want to get out of a relationship or get into a new relationship, or you want to start a new career, you can. You can reinvent yourself without having to suffer through the regret of not having found yourself earlier. Remember, figuring out what you want to do with your life, figuring out what you are meant to do with your life, if you figure that out later in life, that doesn't make you less worthy of realizing that. So as you go along and you think about your life and your past burdens and your mistakes, just remember that they're all layers of you. They are all creating texture for you, just like paintings. You would not exist but for all of those previous mistakes. And hey, even if right now you're not where you want to be, just think of all of those things as building blocks towards getting you towards your eventual happiness. Chin up. Your past, your future, it's all melded and mixed, and it all matters. Thank you so very much.
Hello there. That was wonderful, Julie. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I can hear you. I can't see you.
I know, I'm upstairs.
Oh, now I can see you.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you so much. You know, you and I have been talking about this lecture for a while, and I guess I want to thank you for your willingness to be honest about your journey. And I also want to just talk a little bit about the title of the lecture, saying it all matters, regrets and reinvention. And so with that title, can you unpack a little bit more about the moments along that path where you had some epiphanies? And I'm kind of summarizing some of the questions that I've read, which is, where do you find inspiration when you are taking an alternative path from a lawyer to a professional artist? Were there things along the way that you can remember in terms of indelible moments that allowed you to pivot and take this path?
I mean, I would say it was a bit more gradual. I don't know if there was as many aha moments. I think, as I mentioned in my talk, the most important thing, honestly, was being surrounded by supportive friends and family members, because I do think if you're trying to pivot, there's going to be so many moments of self-doubt, and there's going to be imposter syndrome, and you're going to question why you didn't do it earlier. I mean, there's often this sense of like, oh my gosh, I wish I was me with my brain, but 10 years younger. Like, we all want that, right? And so I think knowing that there's going to be hiccups, and everyone is going to have different hiccups depending on what the pivot is. But if you can really bring people into your life who are very supportive and loving, that's like my biggest advice.
Okay. So what I've always been really interested in is your ability to use your social media platform in a deliberate way. You talked a little bit about your work ethic as it relates to constantly putting up new work and new content. Have you had any interesting conversations with that audience? You know, as we look at more traditional artists who are working with gallerists, have you had moments with that audience that has caused inspirations, or again, a meaningful pivot in the work that you do?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I am completely astounded by how smart some of my Instagram followers are. I've developed real deep friendships with certain Instagram followers we've never even met, but we have real friendship virtually. And I'm continually amazed by what they notice about my work. I mean, they'll compare a piece to an earlier piece. They'll talk about my evolution. They'll talk about, and these are people who are, you know, not art professionals. They just really appreciate art. And there's been many times, I think, where people's engagement with a piece has made me want to kind of create a series around that piece. An example of this would be, I started painting some flower fields fairly recently, like very colorful flower fields, and the engagement around it was just very intense and exciting. And so I kind of kept doing it, and I've done about 30 of these, and I think almost all of them have sold. But it's because of my engagement with Instagram followers. I'll sometimes ask people, what should I paint? You know, what do you guys want to see? Like, do you want to see this or that? And, you know, sometimes what they say is preposterous. And so I don't, you know, like a spaceship with a woman's head float, you know, it's like, I don't know how to paint that. But, you know, generally it's pretty interesting stuff. And so I have those conversations every single day, and I actually look forward to it.
That's great. So we have a few questions. How do you think of success in the painting you do? Is it externally driven, what sells, or do you have your own sense of what they are in conflict?
That's a great question. It's entirely a mix, which is to say, some people have asked me, this is, I think, somewhat related. How do you know when a painting is finished? And I would say that when a painting is successful, it is finished. Half of the time, it's literally because it sells. Like, I don't even know if it's finished, but it's sold. And then half the time it doesn't sell. And if I really love a painting, it's done. And I'm super proud of it. And there are paintings in my home that haven't sold, and I don't exactly know why they haven't sold. And I love them, and they're on my walls, and they are for sale. And I would say I think that they are successful when they accomplish what I'm trying to do, which is that when I look at them, they transport me to a place in my mind that gives me happiness, calm, and joy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's a few questions that are kind of around silver linings. There are some silver linings that are more difficult to find than others. How do you deal with the particularly potent regrets? Do you find that answers and epiphanies come later down the road?
Probably therapy, I would say, is like probably like for the like really deep regrets, get a great therapist. Most of my closest friends are in fact clinical psychologists or therapists. I'm not kidding. So that's useful. I mean, I don't know. I think I absolutely have those moments, and there are things that I really question in my life or wonder or wish they'd gone differently. And if this person asking the question, if you knew me more, like, trust me, like there are lots of unanswered questions in my life right now that I wish were answered. But usually when I get into that like crazy sort of manic anxiety, like, I should have done this or I should have that, or I want to do this. I honestly take a breath and I think we are only on this earth for what, like, if we're lucky, 95 years. And every single day, try to enjoy it, try to appreciate it. We're so small. Humans are so small. I mean, art lasts a little bit, maybe 100, 200, maybe if you're lucky, 500 years, but we're just tiny in the whole like galaxy of life. And so I try to kind of remember that and just focus on the present. But look, hey, it's hard.
Thank you. So you've talked quite a bit about the imposter syndrome, which I think we've all felt and dealt with. So one question is, working as an artist or in a creative field often means dealing with rejection or self-doubt. What were some early experiences as you were beginning your career as an artist that gave you confidence or helped you move past doubt?
Great question. I mean, I will say this, I took the rejection of the book harder than so much rejection that I took in the art world, because I felt like I was supposed to be a good writer and I had been trained in that and I had just devoted so much time and energy into it. For a while, being rejected in the art world like didn't impact me so much because I didn't think I was supposed to be in the art world, and I hadn't been trained. I think actually as I get older and more involved in the art world, like I take rejection harder, and I'm very sensitive as a person anyway. But the great thing about painting or visual arts is like there's always another opportunity. I mean, for every show you don't get into, there's another one that you get to apply to. And so in that, it's very exciting. And for every painting that fails, there's another one that succeeds. So I think the best way I deal with it is to just get my butt back into the studio and just work, create more stuff, try to get better, try to go down a new path.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask a couple more kind of logistical questions. How many hours do you work a day in your studio?
Well, I think my cousin Anna actually jokes about like how little I sleep. So I don't require a lot of sleep, or at least I didn't until I had a child. Now I seem to need a lot of sleep. I would say I work, it varies, but probably between 40 and 60 hours a week.
Okay. And again, the the social media piece is also part of that motivation.
It is. I used to spend roughly 25 hours a week on Instagram engaging with accounts. I spend about 4 to 5 hours a week now on Instagram.
Mhm.
And then maybe 4 to 5 hours on just, I mean, there's so much admin. I have an assistant that's helped a lot with mailing, shipping, studio cleans. But a lot of it is just painting. I mean, I use so much paint and there's so many layers that it just, takes a while.
Yeah. There's another question about Instagram. Do you recommend starting to put your work on Instagram while you're still figuring it out, or style, or waiting until you're a little farther along, like when things are a bit more galvanized?
I waited a bit, but I would still say from when I started, I've been on Instagram now 6 years. I believe that's right, 5 or 6 years.
Mhm.
And when I started out, my work, I would say, is not as strong as it is now, but it was definitely my voice. I didn't really feel like I was searching for my voice so much as just trying to get a little bit more skilled. What I might do in that situation, I might try it out as a private account with friends and maybe don't make it public until, you start to really get psyched about what you're posting.
That's great advice. So just one or two more questions. We're going to wrap it up. What is your best piece of advice that you were given as an artist?
Geez. What was the best piece of advice I was given as an artist? I think I don't want to say best, right? I'm a lawyer, so I'm gonna, come at you with like, 6 different caveats and, but I will say my sister-in-law is an art advisor, and she's married to my brother, the one who gave me the easel and oil paints. And I think fairly early on, they both told me to kind of try to look at a lot of art that's out there. Like, don't just be focused on my own stuff, like really try. And if you can't physically get out there, look at other Instagram accounts, look at other stuff. And that's been useful for me because there's inspiration absolutely everywhere. And I get a ton of inspiration from other accounts on Instagram. So just one piece of advice, get to museums, when we can do that safely again, get out into the world, even go for a walk. Nature is also art, trees are art, but get out of your headspace a little bit. Okay. So, I'm in the studio a lot, but I also leave a lot. I also take a break. I also go on walks and go on runs. Just kind of get out and reset sometimes and get inspiration elsewhere.
That's great. So we'll probably wrap it up now, but I guess I just want to summarize the talk, and what I think is really, really amazing about the path you took is, again, the title, It All Matters. And your training as a lawyer and your past experiences gave you the ability to have the tenacity and the wits and the chops and the work ethic to produce this new chapter in your life. So thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your story. Thank you for all of us who joined us tonight, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in.